The first time Clara Bell met the owner of the house, she was wiping down the slick, unforgiving surface of a Carrara marble console table, battling a film of dust that seemed to regenerate the moment she looked away. The air in the vast, modernist foyer of the Hayes estate felt charged with invisible tension, a stillness that had nothing to do with the outside world and everything to do with the man who owned it. Clara's knees ached from the hours she'd spent focused on cleaning every inch of the imported stone after a disastrous accident last week, an accident that had resulted in the shattering of a priceless 17th-century porcelain sculpture that now represented the crushing weight of her six-figure debt. Mrs. Albright, the impeccably rigid estate manager, had pointed to the delicate, almost invisible scratch Clara was trying to polish out and said, with unnerving calm, "Mr. Hayes expects perfection, Miss Bell. If you cannot make this debt vanish before he returns, you will be liable for the full replacement cost." Clara hadn't dared ask why a piece of such fragile, historic art was positioned directly next to the main entrance. Questioning the whims of billionaires was a luxury reserved for those who didn't face destitution. 6 months ago, she might have dissolved into tears over the weight of her mistake. Now at 27, a single mother to a 5-year-old daughter, Hazel, and drowning in old medical bills and new debt, she was simply grateful for the absurdly high salary that at least chipped away at her mistake. She wiped sweat from her brow, pushing back a stray strand of light brown hair that had escaped her tight bun. "It's not clean enough." The voice, deep and measured, cut through the vast silence of the foyer like a laser. It was quiet, but its very stillness conveyed a terrifying authority. Clara froze, her heart instantly slamming against her ribs. She hadn't heard the front door open, nor the sound of footsteps on the polished floor, yet suddenly he was there. Ethan Hayes stood in the entryway, a shadow absorbing the midday light. He wasn't overtly intimidating in size, but the power that radiated from him was palpable. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that seemed molded to his lean, strong frame, the fabric a stark contrast to the casual comfort of the rest of the world. He looked younger than his rumored age of 35, yet his features, the high, sharp cheekbones, the defined jaw, and a mouth set in a permanent, severe line, spoke of relentless focus. But it was his eyes that forced the air from her lungs. They were a startling, intense grey, and they studied her with the cold, assessing calculation of a financial predator evaluating a struggling asset. Clara kept her head lowered, focusing desperately on the invisible scratch. "I'm sorry, sir, I'll do better." "Look at me when I speak to you, Clara Bell." He didn't raise his voice, yet the use of her full name, delivered with that deep, resonant tone, felt like a command etched in stone. Her heart hammered a chaotic rhythm against her ribs as she slowly lifted her gaze. Meeting his eyes was like staring into a high-powered lens. She felt instantly exposed. "You are new to my personal quarters staff," he stated, his voice an observation, not a question. "Yes, sir, my 2nd month." Her voice was thin, almost unrecognizable. "The antique," he continued, gesturing vaguely towards the repair shop receipt she was working to pay down. "It was highly important to the firm. An accident, I understand." Clara swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. I apologize profoundly, Mr. Hayes. I am working diligently to repay the cost. I can put in extra hours." "Extra hours are inefficient," he dismissed, taking a slow step closer. He was now close enough for her to catch the clean, expensive scent of his cologne, cedar and something sharp like ozone. "You missed a spot here, Clara Bell." He pointed not at the table, but at a section of the marble floor she had polished 4 times already. She knew the floor was spotless. He wasn't pointing out dirt, he was pointing out her flawed existence in his perfect world. "I'll fix it immediately." He held her gaze for an endless moment, that dangerous, calculating grey gaze searching her face. "You live in the Westbrook complex, Building A, rent-controlled unit. Your daughter is Hazel. She's 5 and needs new shoes for school." Clara's breath hitched. How could he possibly know this? The knowledge made her skin prickle with a fear that transcended the professional. "How do you?" I know everything about everyone who enters my personal employ, he cut in, the slight narrowing of his eyes giving her a chill. I acquired your apartment complex's holding company last month. I review every tenant file that is flagged for need. Your daughter has been going without. The fact that he knew about Hazel, that his focus had zeroed in on the one vulnerability she couldn't afford to expose, made her feel terrifyingly exposed. She's fine, sir, she stammered, clinging to a thread of pride. We are fine. His expression didn't soften, yet the severity in his eyes lessened marginally. Finish here, then report to Mrs. Albright in the kitchen. She will have a revised contract and payment schedule for the damages. I have decided to relocate you to work exclusively in my East Wing residence. Your pay will be accelerated. Before she could process the shock or the offer, he turned and walked away, his presence receding as silently as it had arrived. That night, Clara returned to her cramped apartment with a contract that doubled her previous salary, accelerating her ability to pay off the antique damage in months rather than years. Along with the contract was a generous anonymous gift card for a local shoe store. As she tucked Hazel into bed, the fear of the powerful man mixed with a strange, unsettling gratitude. Dante Salvator, the ruthless businessman, had shown a momentary, calculated kindness. What price, she wondered, would she eventually pay for his unexpected generosity? She didn't have long to wait to find out. 3 weeks later, Clara was assigned to the East Wing, Ethan's private residence. Mrs. Albright handed her the key card with the thinnest veneer of professionalism. Mr. Hayes specifically requested you, she said, her tone thick with palpable disapproval. Touch nothing but what needs cleaning. The security system documents everything. The warning was unnecessary. Clara had spent enough time in the estate to understand the unspoken rule: observe but do not see, listen but do not hear, know but do not speak. The East Wing was fundamentally different from the rest of the house. The main areas were designed to impress with cold, almost intimidating luxury. These rooms, however, felt lived in. A rare, first-edition book was left open on a side table. A half-full glass of water sat on the bedside cabinet. Fingerprints still visible on its surface. It was a faint sign of humanity in a place that otherwise felt like a museum dedicated to wealth and power. She was meticulously smoothing the high thread count duvet on the massive king-sized bed when she heard the door slide open behind her. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly, shifting like the pressure dropping before a storm. Your efficiency has been noted, Ethan said, his voice closer than expected. If you've been captivated by Clara and Ethan's story so far, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. It really helps me connect with my audience. Clara turned slowly to find him standing just inside the doorway, watching her with that same unreadable intensity. Today he wore no tie, just a crisp white shirt with the sleeves meticulously rolled up to expose forearms corded with lean muscle. A thin, almost imperceptible silver line of scar tissue ran along the inner curve of his left forearm, disappearing beneath his cuff, a flicker of evidence that even the untouchable Mr. Hayes was human enough to bleed. Thank you, sir, she managed, her voice steadier now than it had been at their first meeting. You haven't asked about the accelerated pay or the gift card. Clara continued smoothing the duvet, careful not to wrinkle the silk. It is not my place to question your decisions, Mr. Hayes. I am grateful for the opportunity to fulfill my obligation faster. Look at me, Clara. She obeyed, though every instinct screamed at her to keep her head down, to make herself small and invisible. When their eyes met, she was surprised to find something akin to curiosity, not just calculation, in the grey depths. Most people want something from me, he stated. They take what I offer and immediately ask for more. You have said nothing. I have Hazel to think about, she admitted, the truth escaping before she could filter it. Pride is a luxury for people who don't have children depending on them. Something shifted in his expression, a softening so slight she might have imagined it. How did you end up here, scrubbing down a house that belongs to a man you don't trust? The question caught her off guard. No one in this house had ever asked about her life. Bad luck, she said simply. A relationship that ended badly. Financial distress after an unexpected illness for my daughter that wasn't covered by insurance. The usual story. What happened to your back? The question hit her like a physical blow. Her hand instinctively flew toward her left shoulder blade, where the pale, jagged edge of a scar was visible beneath the collar of her uniform. She'd been so careful, so careful. I don't know what you mean, she lied, her heart pounding so hard she was certain he could hear the frantic drumming. In 3 smooth, deliberate strides, he crossed the room, closing the distance between them. She flinched instinctively, a reflex born from years of self-preservation. His eyes narrowed at her reaction, cataloguing the subtle movement with cold precision. Don't lie to me, Clara. His voice was soft, carrying a dangerous edge. I saw them when you reached to dust the top shelf in the library last week. Not burns, perhaps, but deep trauma. A knife or a blade, if I'm not mistaken. Shame burned through her, hot and suffocating. Those scars were her deepest secret, the physical agonizing reminder of the worst night of her life. The night she told Owen Miller she was leaving him and taking Hazel. It was a long time ago, she whispered, her gaze fixed on his chest. Ethan's expression remained neutral, yet the air around him seemed to vibrate with controlled fury. Who? It doesn't matter anymore. It matters to me. The possessiveness in those 4 simple words should have terrified her. Instead, something primal and warm unfurled deep in her chest. Why would you care about the scars of a woman who cleans your floors? She asked, immediately regretting her boldness. Instead of anger, a fleeting, almost imperceptible smile ghosted across his lips. Perhaps I've developed a professional interest in the well-being of my staff, or perhaps I simply see potential in what belongs to my firm. I don't belong to your firm, Mr. Hayes, she challenged, the words escaping before she could stop them. His grey eyes darkened, an intense, possessive look taking over. Every person earning a living under my roof is, in a professional sense, an asset. The sooner you accept that reality, the easier your life will be. He reached out slowly, and she fought the powerful urge to step back as his fingertips brushed the raised scar tissue near her collar. The fleeting contact sent a strange surge of warmth through her. Effective tomorrow, you will begin working exclusively in my private quarters, he said, withdrawing his hand. Your salary is now doubled again. I will arrange for a private tutor to oversee Hazel's education during your extended hours, starting immediately. It wasn't a request. Why? She asked, unable to stop the word from escaping. Because I invest in what is valuable, he answered simply, and I've decided your loyalty and presence are highly valuable assets to the East Wing. As he turned to leave, panic surged into her throat. Mr. Hayes, she called after him, the man who gave me these scars. He's still out there. If he finds us, he will use Hazel. Ethan paused at the door, looking back at her over his shoulder. The intensity in his eyes was almost overwhelming. He won't be a problem for long, Clara Bell, he said softly. I promise you that. After he left, Clara sank onto the edge of the bed, her legs suddenly too weak to hold her. What had she done? In a moment of weakness, she'd revealed too much, drawing the attention of a man who commanded the global markets as casually as others swatted flies. That night, holding Hazel close, breathing in her daughter's sweet scent, she knew she had traded one precarious existence for another, a potentially gilded one with a man who, though not physically dangerous to her, would demand absolute compliance. 3 weeks later, Clara and Hazel were living in the East Wing. The transition had happened with frightening corporate efficiency. One day, Clara was a housekeeper. The next, she was installed in a large apartment suite on the estate's grounds, with Hazel in a nursery suite that looked like it had been plucked from an architectural magazine. She never asked how he arranged the private school tutoring and the legal paperwork so quickly. Some questions were safer left unasked. Tonight, Hazel's temperature had spiked suddenly, her little body burning against Clara's. Clara had crept downstairs to the massive, commercial-grade kitchen to find medicine, trying not to disturb the estate's silent operation. In Ethan's world, she quickly learned, inconvenience was noted and sometimes penalized. "What's wrong with her?" The voice behind her sent a bolt of ice through her veins. She turned to find Ethan standing in the kitchen doorway. He wore black jogging bottoms and a plain grey t-shirt. In the sterile light, she noticed how the shirt stretched across the powerful muscles of his chest and shoulders. "She has a fever," Clara explained, her voice strained as Hazel whimpered in her arms. "I was looking for children's pain reliever. I apologize for the noise." Instead of the annoyance she expected, something unsettling crossed his face, a flash of genuine concern. "How high?" he asked, crossing the space between them. 103.1. It came on fast. Without seeking permission, he reached out and placed his large, cool hand gently against Hazel's forehead. To Clara's surprise, Hazel quieted instantly, her small sobs reducing to sniffles as she blinked up at the intimidating man with fever-bright eyes. "My private physician will be here in 15 minutes, he said, already reaching for his phone on the counter. "At midnight, Mr. Hayes, that isn't necessary. I can take her to urgent care." "It is necessary, Clara," he stated, his name in his mouth serving as both a gentle warning and a caress. "When I say my doctor will come, he will come, regardless of the hour." True to his word, exactly 12 minutes later, a distinguished elderly man with kind eyes and a state-of-the-art medical bag arrived. He did not look the least bit surprised to have been summoned to the Hayes estate in the middle of the night. As the doctor examined Hazel, Ethan stood watching with an intensity that should have been deeply unsettling. Instead, Clara found herself drawing strange comfort from his presence, solid and unwavering in the bright, sterile kitchen light. "A simple viral infection," the doctor eventually pronounced, packing away his instruments. "I've administered an anti-inflammatory. I've left a prescription for a full course of antibiotics and will schedule a follow-up test. Nothing serious, Ms. Bell." Relief flooded through Clara, making her knees weak. Hazel had already fallen asleep against her shoulder, exhausted and comforted by the initial medicine. "Thank you," Clara whispered, feeling the words were profoundly inadequate. "I don't know how I can pay for this." The doctor smiled, a genuine, warm expression. "Mr. Hayes ensures that his inner circle is cared for. There is no charge." "Loving the journey, me too. Tell me in the comments where you're watching this story from. Thanks for listening so far." After the doctor left, Clara expected Ethan to return to his quarters, his duty fulfilled. Instead, he led her into the adjacent sitting room, where a fire still flickered low in the massive stone fireplace. "Sit," he commanded, nodding toward a plush armchair. Clara obeyed, carefully cradling the sleeping Hazel. Ethan poured a deep amber liquid from a crystal decanter into a tumbler and handed it to her. "Drink," he advised. "It will help with the shock." "I'm not in shock," she protested, even as she accepted the glass. His lips curved into something almost like a subtle smile. "Your hands haven't stopped trembling since you came downstairs. You're a poor liar, Clara." She took a slow sip of the expensive bourbon, the liquid burning a pleasant path down her throat, warming her from the inside out. "Why are you doing all this?" she finally asked, the question that had been burning inside her for weeks finally escaping. "The suite, the tutor, the doctor. Why us?" Ethan settled into the chair opposite hers, his grey eyes reflecting the dying firelight. "When I was 10, my father acquired this company," he said, his voice dropping low, sharing a rare personal detail. The pressure was immediate, constant. There was never any time for weakness, never any space for mistakes. I was raised to believe that need was a flaw. Anyone who expressed it was disposable. He leaned forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "It taught me an important lesson about value. True value isn't found in being perfectly cold. Any corporate machine can achieve that. True power is in having the ability to prevent suffering and choosing to use it, especially for those who would never ask for it." He continued, his gaze intense. "I saw your scars, Clara. I saw what someone did to you because they could, because they sought absolute domination. You were protecting your child when you got them. That is the highest form of value. Clara instinctively touched the hidden scar. That doesn't explain why you brought us here. Perhaps I recognized something in you, something that called to the part of me that was once fragile, he admitted. Or perhaps I simply wanted to show you what it feels like to be protected rather than possessed. The irony of his words didn't escape her. Everything about Ethan Hayes screamed calculated control. What happened to Hazel's father? She asked suddenly, the question that had haunted her since he first mentioned knowing her past. After I told you about the scars, he seemed to drop off the grid. That wasn't a coincidence. Ethan's expression didn't change, but something cold and deadly settled over him. Do you truly want to know the details of my firm's legal actions? She thought about Owen Miller, the man who had held her down and threatened her when she refused to leave with him. No, she admitted quietly, I don't think I do. Smart girl, the approval in his voice sent an inappropriate thrill through her. But I need to know something else, she continued, emboldened by the bourbon and the strange intimacy of the midnight hour. What do you want from me, Ethan? Really? His eyes darkened at the sound of his first name on her lips, the first time she'd used it instead of Mr. Hayes. He stood, moving toward her with the fluid grace of a confident man, dropping to one knee beside her chair so his face was level with hers. What I want, he said softly, reaching out to brush a strand of hair from her face, is for you to stop flinching when I come near you. What I want is for you to understand that not all men use their strength to break things. His fingers trailed down to the collar of her nightshirt, gently pulling it aside to reveal the edge of the scar. Unlike earlier, when shame had flooded her, a rush of vulnerability and anticipation coursed through her veins at his touch. Your scars don't make you broken, Clara. They make you a survivor, his voice had dropped to a whisper, and I find that resilience extremely compelling. The air between them changed, charged with dangerous, electric possibility. His face was inches from hers, close enough that she could feel the faint warmth of his breath. For one wild, terrifying moment, she thought he might kiss her, and worse, that she might desperately lean into it. Instead, he stood abruptly, putting distance between them. Get some rest. The doctor will return tomorrow to follow up on Hazel. He was gone before she could respond, leaving her breathless and confused, with a sleeping child in her arms and the lingering phantom warmth of his touch on her skin. The next morning, a package arrived for Hazel, a beautiful wooden dollhouse, complete with tiny handcrafted furniture and a collection of classic children's literature. There was no card, no message, but Clara knew who they were from, just as she knew the designer clothes that had mysteriously appeared in her closet the day after she moved in were his doing. Ethan Hayes was courting her in his own strange, intensely focused way, through gestures of protection, resources, and quiet devotion, rather than passionate words. Clara told herself she was simply taking advantage of his inexplicable interest to give Hazel a better, safer life, that when the time was right, they would leave this comfortable estate and make their own way. She almost believed it until the night of the charity gala. You will attend with me, Ethan informed her one morning as she poured his second cup of coffee, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request for her convenience. The event honors the foundation my family has supported for 3 generations. It's a key visibility requirement. I can't, Clara protested, the cup clattering slightly in the saucer. I don't belong at events like that. I am a member of your domestic staff. His eyes flashed with something sharp. Is that all you think you are to me, Clara? The question hung between them, loaded with implications she wasn't ready to face. What else would I be? He stood from the breakfast table, moving to stand so close she could smell his sophisticated cologne, bergamot and sandalwood with undertones of something darker, more intense. That's what we'll determine tonight, he said softly. A driver will collect you at 7. Mrs. Albright will supervise Hazel's sitter. That evening, Clara stood before the mirror in her new suite, barely recognizing the woman who stared back at her. The dress, delivered that afternoon without explanation, was a deep, rich sapphire blue that made her eyes look like warm amber in the low light. It hugged curves she'd forgotten she possessed after years of oversized uniforms. Her hair, usually pulled back in a severe, practical bun, fell in loose, elegant waves past her shoulders. For the first time since she fled her past, she looked like the woman she was supposed to have been. When she descended the grand, sweeping staircase, Ethan was waiting in the foyer below, his back to her as he spoke quietly into his phone. He wore a tuxedo that accentuated his broad shoulders and narrow waist, a picture of effortless, dominating wealth. As he finished the call and turned, the expression that crossed his face as he looked up at her stole the breath from her lungs. It wasn't simple admiration, it was absolute appreciation. "You look breathtaking," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "Thank you," she managed, the words a whisper as he helped her into the waiting sedan. His hand lingered on the small of her back, sending an electric shiver up her spine. As the car pulled away from the estate, Clara watched Ethan from the corner of her eye, struck by how different he seemed outside the confines of his home, more alert, more controlled, if such a thing were possible for a man who already exuded absolute command. A security car discreetly followed them. "People will talk," she said suddenly, anxiety fluttering in her chest, "about you bringing a member of your staff to a high-profile event." His lips curved into that barely there smile that never failed to quicken her pulse. "Let them talk. In my world, Clara, perception is power. Tonight we shape that perception to our advantage." "And what perception is that?" His grey eyes met hers in the dim interior of the car, dark and intense. "That you are under my protection, that anyone who touches you touches me." "Why would anyone want to touch me?" "Because you are with me," he said simply. "And in my world, what is connected to Ethan Hayes is always a target for my business rivals." The sedan slowed as they approached the Grand Hotel, lit up like a beacon against the night sky. Before they pulled to a complete stop, Ethan reached across the space between them and took her hand, his thumb tracing slow, deliberate circles against her palm. "There's something you should know before we enter," he said, his voice low. "There will be people there tonight who know your background. They will assume you are my mistress at best, a social climber at worst." Heat flooded her cheeks. "And am I your mistress?" The question hung between them, charged with possibilities. "That depends," he replied, his eyes never leaving hers, "on whether you want to be claimed." Before she could respond, the car door opened, and Ethan stepped out, extending his hand to help her. As she emerged, flashbulbs exploded around them, photographers capturing the arrival of the formidable Ethan Hayes and his mysterious, stunning companion. His arm slid around her waist, pulling her against his side in a gesture that was both protective and utterly possessive. "Smile," he whispered against her ear, his breath warm against her skin. "Tonight you are no longer invisible." As they walked toward the entrance, Clara felt the weight of 100 curious stares, heard the questions rippling through the crowd. Who was this woman on the arm of the city's most eligible bachelor? Where did she come from? What power did she hold over the untouchable Ethan Hayes? What none of them knew, what Clara was only beginning to understand, was that the real question wasn't what power she held over him. It was what power he had already claimed over her. The ballroom glittered with the city's wealth and power. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light over women dripping in jewels and men whose casual conversations shaped national policy. Clara felt like an imposter, despite the designer gown and Ethan's hand resting possessively at the small of her back. "Stop looking like you're about to flee," Ethan murmured, his lips close to her ear. "You belong here as much as anyone." "We both know that's not true," she whispered back. "I was polishing your antique console a month ago." His grip tightened slightly, a subtle reminder of his strength. "And tonight you are on my arm, which makes you more powerful than half the CEOs in this room. Remember that." Before she could respond, an older man with silver hair and shrewd eyes approached them. Though he offered a smile, there was only calculation and barely disguised curiosity in his expression. Ethan, he greeted, his accent smooth and corporate. William Thorne, what a pleasant surprise. You rarely grace these events with such stunning company. William, Ethan nodded, his posture subtly shifting, becoming more guarded, more professional. The foundation is worth the inconvenience. Clara Bell, this is William Thorne, head of Thorne Global Acquisition. Charmed, William said, taking Clara's hand and bringing it to his lips. I wonder where Ethan has been hiding such a beautiful little secret. In plain sight, Clara replied, surprising herself with her boldness. Sometimes the most valuable assets are not locked away. William's eyebrows rose, and beside her, Clara felt rather than heard Ethan's quiet approval. Indeed, William said, his eyes hardening slightly as he turned back to Ethan. Speaking of valuable assets, we should discuss the pending acquisition bids privately. Your absence from certain negotiation rounds has been noted. Not tonight, William, Ethan replied smoothly. Tonight is for charity, not corporate warfare. A flash of sharp annoyance crossed William's face. The matter is time-sensitive. Be careful, Ethan. My firm monitors all potential vulnerabilities in the market. Something dangerous flickered in Ethan's grey eyes. Be very careful with your surveillance, William. Over-involvement in my personal affairs could be hazardous to your professional health. The threat hung in the air between them, wrapped in the veneer of polite conversation. As William Thorne melted back into the crowd, Clara released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. He doesn't like me. He doesn't know what to make of you, Ethan corrected, guiding her toward the bar. Which makes you a variable he can't control. Men like William fear what they can't control. And men like you, she asked, accepting the champagne flute he handed her. His lips curved slightly. Men like me neutralize what we can't control, or we possess it so completely that control becomes irrelevant. The words sent a shiver down her spine, a reminder that the man beside her, with his gentle touches and protective gestures, still wielded the kind of power that could destroy lives. Is that what you're doing with me? She asked, the champagne making her bold. Possessing me so completely that you don't need to control me. His eyes darkened as they fixed on hers. Do you feel controlled, Clara? The question gave her pause. In the weeks she'd lived under his roof, he'd never once raised his voice, never threatened, never demanded anything physical or personal. He had only offered security, resources, and respect. I feel, she hesitated, searching for the right word. Protected, there's a difference, isn't there? Control is restriction, he said softly. It is punishment and reward, action and consequence. Protection, his hand splayed against her lower back, warm through the thin fabric of her dress, is freedom within boundaries. The freedom to live without fear, to heal, to grow, to want. And which do you prefer? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. His eyes held hers, dark and intent. With you, neither. What then? His grip tightened almost imperceptibly. Devotion. The word hung between them, heavy with meaning she wasn't ready to face. Before she could respond, the music swelled and Ethan held out his hand. Dance with me. It wasn't a request, but she took his hand anyway, allowing him to lead her to the center of the ballroom. His arm circled her waist, drawing her against him with a possessiveness that should have frightened her. Instead, she found herself melting into his embrace, her body fitting against his as though designed for that purpose. The power you hold, he murmured, his voice low enough that only she could hear, is the power of my focus. You distract me, you challenge me, you make me want to be better. That is a threat to my enemies. Throughout the rest of the evening, she watched him navigate the crowd with the calculated precision of a financial chess master, charming when necessary, intimidating when useful. Everyone wanted something from him, a deal, a favor, an alliance. And through it all, he kept her at his side, his protective hand never leaving her. It was well past midnight when they finally left, the sedan gliding through empty streets as Clara watched city lights blur past the window. The silence between them was charged with unspoken words, questions she didn't dare ask, answers he wasn't yet ready to give. When they arrived back at the estate, Ethan walked her to her suite, stopping at the door. "Did Mrs. Albright say how Hazel was tonight?" she asked, desperate to break the rising tension between them. "She slept through the evening," the tutor left a glowing report. His eyes hadn't left her face since they entered the house. "You should check on her." She nodded, reaching for the doorknob, only to feel his hand close gently around her wrist, stopping her. "Clara." Her name in his mouth was both question and command. She turned back to him, her heart pounding against her ribs. "Yes." "Tonight, when William Thorne looked at you, when they all looked at you, do you know what they saw?" She shook her head slightly. "They saw a woman who holds my interest." His thumb traced slow circles against her pulse point. "A woman I would bankrupt rivals to protect." The admission sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with fear. "Is that true?" she whispered. His answer was to lean forward, his lips brushing against her ear. "Go check on your daughter, Clara. We'll finish this conversation another time." Then he was gone, leaving her breathless and confused at her own door. Clara should have known their fragile peace couldn't last. The warning came 3 days after the gala, delivered in the form of a small, discreet legal envelope addressed to her personally. She was sitting in the library, watching Hazel color quietly at a nearby table, when a nervous assistant appeared with the mail. The envelope contained a single document, a petition for paternity and custody, filed by Owen Miller. Ice flooded her veins as she read the name. Someone had found them. Someone was planning to use Hazel against her, and by extension against Ethan. "What is this, Mama?" Hazel asked, pointing at the seal. "Nothing, baby," Clara said, her voice shaking. "It's just paperwork." She ran to Ethan immediately. She found him in his private study, conferring with 2 men in bespoke suits. She burst through the door without knocking, the legal documents clutched in her trembling hand. "Mr. Hayes, I am so sorry, but look." She thrust the papers onto his massive mahogany desk. Ethan's grey eyes met hers, something like immediate understanding flashing in their depths. "Gentlemen, a moment." He dismissed the 2 men, clearly senior legal counsel, with a curt gesture, and they instantly filed out, closing the heavy door behind them. Clara was shaking. "This isn't possible. Owen, he shouldn't be able to find us. He was supposed to be neutralized." "Clara," Ethan stood up, his posture rigid with controlled tension. He picked up the documents and scanned them quickly. "He's found you. This is his countermove. He couldn't hurt me financially, so he targeted the one person who could hurt you most." "But how?" "Money and influence," Ethan said grimly. "Enough money can find anyone, and I suspect William Thorne is financing the legal fees. He's found a way to use your past to hurt my present." Cold realization settled over her. He didn't disappear, you paid him off, you made him stop. Something like deep regret flashed across Ethan's face. "I had him served with a comprehensive cease and desist. I offered him a generous sum, conditional on him signing away all parental rights and vanishing permanently. A clean, legal break. I was attempting to respect your desire for a non-violent resolution." His jaw tightened. "A mistake I won't repeat." Fear clutched at her chest, not for herself but for Ethan. "Dante, no. If anything happens to him now after he threatened you publicly, came to your house—" "I don't care," he interrupted, his voice rough with emotion. "I let him live once and he came back to threaten what is mine. There won't be a second chance for him to terrorize you." "They'll connect it to you," panic rose within her. "They'll take you away from us. He'll paint you as a jealous benefactor using intimidation." His expression softened slightly as he crossed to her, his hands gentle as they framed her face despite the fury still evident in every line of his body. "No one takes me from what's mine, Clara. Not William Thorne, not Owen Miller, and not the courts." "Please," she pleaded quietly, clinging to his shirt. "There has to be another way, a legal way." For a long moment he studied her face. Then, with visible effort, he reined in his rage. 3 days, he said finally. "I will give my legal team exactly 3 days to annihilate this action legally and permanently. If they can't make him disappear through the courts, His expression hardened and his eyes glinted like granite. Then I will ruin him financially and socially until he willingly signs his rights away and leaves the country. I promise you, one way or another, he will be gone from your life by the end of the week. Relief flooded her, temporary though it might be. Thank you. His hand stroked her cheek, a gesture at once tender and fiercely protective. Don't thank me yet, Clara. One way or another, the father of your child will be gone from your life by the end of the week. The only question is whether he'll be ruined or simply broken. Then we face this together, she said, making her choice once and for all. Whatever comes. His answer was to pull her against his chest, strong and claiming, as though sealing a pact between them. The next 3 days passed in a haze of tension and waiting. The East Wing transformed into a legal war room. Ethan barely slept, disappearing into his study with a rotating cast of his top legal minds. Clara could hear his voice, cold and precise, issuing commands that spoke of forensic accounting, opposition research, and strategic litigation. On the evening of the 3rd day, she put Hazel to bed, exhausted from the constant vigilance. As she sang her daughter's favorite lullaby, she saw a shadow in the doorway. Ethan stood watching them, his expression softer than she had seen it since Owen's visit. Fatigue lined his face, a rare sign that even he had limits. She's beautiful when she sleeps, he said quietly as Clara joined him in the hallway, pulling Hazel's door half closed behind her. She's always beautiful, Clara replied with a tired smile. His hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing across her cheekbone with surprising tenderness. Like her mother, what's happened? Did the lawyers? Let's go to my study, he interrupted gently. We need to talk. Fear clutched at her chest as she followed him. Ethan's study had been restored to its former pristine state. He poured them each a drink, and Clara accepted hers gratefully, needing the liquid courage. The legal approach has been successful, he said without preamble, leaning against his desk. Owen Miller has powerful if slimy backing. William Thorne funded the initial filing, hopping to keep me distracted. It was a calculated financial move, nothing more. And Owen, the name still tasted bitter on her tongue. He wants money, he doesn't care about Hazel, never did. Ethan's voice was flat with professional disgust. This was pure extortion. I offered him a settlement, $2 million, more than enough to vanish permanently. He refused, convinced Thorne would give him more to use against me. So what happened? Ethan pushed away from the desk, moving to stand before her. His hands framed her face, gentle despite the intense, cold resolve in his eyes. Now I keep my promise, he said softly. Now I make him disappear, through the legal system. He looked directly into her eyes. My team used the time to uncover his true past. We found his original financial motive, the pattern of manipulation, and a comprehensive paper trail documenting the psychological abuse he inflicted on you that night, the same night he left you with those scars. He never reported your instability to police or doctors, only to his own attorney years later. We also secured sworn testimony regarding his refusal to pay for Hazel's medical costs years ago. But the scars, the judge will see I was protecting myself, not acting unstable. Exactly, Ethan affirmed. We will not paint you as a broken victim. We will establish you as a survivor who defended herself and her child against a manipulative financial predator. He paused, his expression softening slightly. Legally, without any violence, we have boxed him in. He has been served with a countersuit that will expose his financial fraud, destroy his reputation, and most importantly, render him an unfit, non-custodial parent, effectively eliminating him from Hazel's life. Relief washed through Clara, so profound it brought tears to her eyes. He's gone, for good. For good, Ethan confirmed. Thorne will pull his support instantly now that Owen is a liability. We won, cleanly, legally, permanently. You did it, she whispered, clinging to his shirt. You protected us. I told you I invest in what is valuable, he murmured, pulling her close. There's something else, Ethan said, his expression shifting, a rare vulnerability creeping in. He pulled back slightly, his eyes holding hers. "Something I need to ask you now that this is done." Her heart fluttered wildly as he reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. With a surprising grace, the powerful CEO dropped to one knee before her. "Clara Bell," he said, opening the box to reveal a massive, brilliant diamond ring that caught the lamplight like captured fire. "When this is over, when you and Hazel are truly safe, I want to give you my name. I want to give Hazel my protection, my legacy, and the stability she deserves." He met her gaze with a sincerity that stole the air from her lungs. "I want to be her father in every way that matters. I want the world to know that you belong to me, not as an asset, but as my partner. Will you be my wife?" Tears blurred her vision as she stared down at this complicated, intimidating yet intensely protective man. There were 1,000 reasons to say no: his cold world of finance, the sheer power difference, the permanent public spotlight. Yet in that moment none of them mattered. He had chosen the high road, fighting her battle with intelligence and legal power rather than brutality. "Yes," she said, the word escaping on a breath. "Yes, I'll marry you." A genuine, breathtaking smile transformed his face as he slid the ring onto her finger. The diamond was enormous, a clear, powerful declaration of his devotion and a promise of absolute, unshakable security. Ethan rose to his feet, pulling her against him in a kiss that was at once tender and deeply claiming. When he finally broke away, his eyes were still dark with resolve, but now softened with tenderness. "Wait for me in our bed," he murmured, his hands lingering at her waist. "This is over. We start tomorrow." As she left the study, watching him already back on the phone, quietly instructing his lawyers to finalize the paperwork and ensure Owen Miller could never contact them again, she felt a profound sense of peace. Tomorrow they would begin a new chapter, not as the broken woman who'd once scrubbed blood money from a marble floor, but as the future Mrs. Hayes. The cage had become a fortress, built by the man who had loved her not despite her scars, but because of her strength to survive them. Ethan didn't return until dawn, slipping into her bed just as the first pale light filtered through the curtains. Clara stirred at his presence, reaching for him instinctively. "Is it done?" she whispered, her voice thick with exhaustion and relief. His arms encircled her, pulling her against the solid warmth of his chest. "It's done," he confirmed. "He signed the papers this morning, relinquishing all rights and agreeing to a permanent non-disclosure agreement. Owen Miller will never trouble you or Hazel again. He is leaving the country." The relief that washed through Clara was so profound it bordered on physical pain. The shadow of fear that had followed them everywhere was gone. "And William Thorne?" she asked, knowing the business threat hadn't entirely passed. Ethan's hand stroked the length of her spine, a soothing, calming gesture. "A message has been sent. His attempted leverage failed publicly. He's a businessman at heart. He won't risk further losses for a vendetta that failed. He tested my boundaries and found them absolute." "How can you be so sure?" His lips brushed her forehead, unexpectedly gentle. "Because in this world, Clara, there are lines even men like William won't cross. He now knows that you are my future. Anyone who threatens my family forfeits their right to corporate peace." Family, the word echoed in her mind, sweet and powerful. Somehow, in the chaos of corporate espionage, past trauma, and the desperate need for safety, they had formed something she'd never truly had before, a family built on shared trust and unwavering protection. "When do you want to get married?" she asked, changing the subject to something bright and forward-looking. She felt Ethan's smile against her hair. "As soon as possible. A month, perhaps 2, for the legal team to complete the full adoption process. A small ceremony, just family and my closest associates." The casual mention of family gave her pause. "Do you have family? You've never mentioned them." A moment of silence followed. "I have a sister, Samantha, in Milan. She runs the European division of Hayes Global. We speak rarely, for professional distance more than anything else." "Will she come for the wedding?" "She'll come," he confirmed. "Samantha has been waiting a long time for me to find someone worth bringing into the family structure, someone who challenges me." Warmth bloomed in her chest at the thought that she might be worthy of such consideration. "And Hazel," she asked, "will you adopt her?" Ethan shifted, propping himself up on one elbow to look down at her, his expression serious in the growing light. "If you'll allow it, I want her to have my name, my protection, my legacy. I want to be her father in every way that matters." Tears pricked at her eyes, unexpected and overwhelming. The image of Ethan, who had orchestrated the downfall of a corporate rival with cold efficiency, teaching Hazel to ride a bike or reading her a bedtime story, was almost too much to bear. "She already loves you," Clara whispered, reaching up to touch his face. "She lights up when you enter a room." A raw, vulnerable look flashed across his features, gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "And you, Clara, do you love me? Not just for the safety I provide, not just for what I can give you, but for who I am." The question caught her off guard. Ethan Hayes, who commanded a global empire with absolute authority, was asking if she loved him, as though her answer could possibly be anything else. "Yes," she answered, the truth of it settling deep in her bones. "I love every part of you, even the parts that terrify me with their precision and power." Relief softened his expression, and he lowered his mouth to hers in a kiss that was surprisingly gentle. "Good," he murmured against her lips, "because I've loved you since the moment I saw you scrubbing my marble floor, so determined, so broken, yet still fighting for your child." They made love as the sun rose, his touches gentle, as though reminding both of them that his power was now dedicated to creation and care, not conflict. Afterward, as they lay tangled in the sheets, his fingers traced the scars on her back, not with pity but with reverence. "These are badges of honor," he said quietly, "proof that you survived, that you protected our daughter when no one else would." "Our daughter," the simple phrase brought fresh tears to her eyes. "I want more," she confessed, the words escaping before she could reconsider them. "More children, a brother or sister for Hazel." Ethan's hand stilled against her skin, his eyes finding hers with an intensity that stole her breath. "You would bear my children." The vulnerability in the question broke her heart a little. For all his power, all his wealth, he still couldn't quite believe that she had chosen him completely. "Yes," she whispered, bringing his hand to her stomach. "I want to carry your child, Ethan. I want to build a family with you." The smile that transformed his face was like a sunrise breaking through a cold, grey morning, rare and breathtaking. "Then we start trying immediately," he declared, rolling her beneath him once more. "I am a very determined man, Clara. I always get what I want." Later that morning, as Ethan and Clara sat at breakfast with Hazel babbling happily between them, Clara caught him watching them with an expression she'd never seen before. Contentment, perhaps, or something close to profound peace. "What are you thinking?" she asked, reaching across the table to take his hand, his fingers interlaced with hers, strong and steady. "That some men spend their lives accumulating wealth, power, and territory, believing these things will fill the emptiness inside them." His eyes met hers, dark and sincere. "I was one of those men until I found something worth more than all of it." "And what's that?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. His gaze moved from her to Hazel, then back again, his expression softening in a way few people would ever witness. "A family to protect," he said simply. "A reason to come home." As she looked at him across the breakfast table, this dangerous, complicated man who had commanded the utter destruction of his rival's life and reputation, she realized they had both found what they truly needed. He had found something worth more than power. She had found something better than simple safety. They had found each other. 6 weeks later, she became Clara Hayes in a small ceremony overlooking the estate's private lake. Hazel, resplendent in a little floral dress, threw rose petals with reckless abandon and called Ethan Papa for the first time. That night, as they stood on their private balcony, Ethan's arms encircled her from behind, his hands resting possessively but gently on her lower stomach. "My wife," he murmured against her neck, the words filled with quiet satisfaction. "My family." Clara leaned back against his solid strength, feeling safer and more cherished than she had ever imagined possible. The scars on her back no longer burned with shame, but spoke of a harrowing journey that had led her here, to this man, this life, this unexpected happiness. "No regrets?" he asked, a rare note of vulnerability in his voice. She turned in his arms, reaching up to frame his face with her hands. "None," she promised, meaning it completely. "Every struggle, every moment of fear, every scar, they were all leading me to you. You are my safe harbor, Ethan." His kiss was gentle, reverent, a promise of absolute legal protection and devotion that would never falter. And as the stars shone overhead, she surrendered completely to the truth she'd been fighting since the first moment she saw him. Some lives weren't meant to be escaped. Some were meant to be called home. Thank you so much for watching Clara and Ethan's story. If you enjoyed this journey of protection and love, please like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Let me know what part of the story resonated with you most in the comments below.